My name is Barb and I scored 730 on the GMAT using the Target Test Prep Dedicated Study Program. My background is in film and television. I have a bachelor's of fine arts, but currently I work in HR, and I haven't done any significant quantitative work in over a decade. When I first started working towards my 730 on the GMAT, I took a benchmarking test and scored a 550. And then I used the official guide and worked through that, both the quant and the verbal sections and all of the practice problems, to see where I was going to get, because I thought, if I work through the textbook, I'm going to see some improvement in my score. And when I took another practice test following completing the official guide, I scored a 550. So it was at that point that I realized, I'm going to need some outside help achieving the score for the schools that I want to be a competitive applicant at. I came across Target Test Prep from browsing GMAT Club and also talking to other women I knew who were applying for MBAs. A couple of them had used Target Test Prep and had pretty quickly achieved the scores that they needed. And so I thought that would be a good platform for me to seek out. And I think for me, because my schedule was so busy and variable, I really needed to have a self-study platform that was going to be flexible to meet my needs. I started using Target Test Prep in March of 2022, so March of last year, and it took me about a year to work through the course. I did take a big break in the middle, but I think my analytics on my learning platform shows about 400 hours of study, which doesn't include, all the practice tests that I took outside of the TTP platform. But yeah, soup to nuts, it took me from March 22 to August of 2023 to achieve my score. And I took the test a total of 6 times, which I do not recommend. I knew right away that just looking at the course load and the amount of practice that was on TGP was like totally daunting, and I really wanted to cut corners. I wanted this process to be as quick as possible, and I wanted to get by with doing as little as work as I can, because we all are managing the economy of our own time, and studying for the GMAT is not the most fun thing that I've ever done in my life. When I signed up for TGP, I realized actually there's going to be there's an enormous hill to climb for me specifically, because I was coming into it without having had any recent quantitative work of any kind. So I was really it was almost like taking, most of high school math all over again. That being said, I knew immediately it was going to set me up for success once I worked through the first few chapters, because the quality of the course content just jumps out at you and is immediately clear. It is, extremely well thought out, to the point, with extremely helpful explanations that are efficient and never leave you wanting. I will also say that the way that when you're working through the course content, the way that it moves between concepts and then having you build those concepts organically in your own mind is really incredible. So present an idea, and then it will give you a practice question where it has that concept built into it, but it also requires you to think critically and incorporates a couple other elements to take another step. And so there's this constant leading where you are really developing knowledge on your own terms. It's not just, okay, I have to memorize all of these things. And I think that process is what really made the difference for me. A big issue for me was just making careless math errors all the time. I would, work too fast or not, whatever. I would make a lot of really careless errors, and it would, stump me and cause me to waste a lot of time on questions. And over time, as I got towards the end of the course, I started noticing that I had done, because of the way that TTP had structured its learning, where it had really given me that piece to go one step further organically, that by the time I got towards the end of the course, where it was all starting to come together, that my hand and the pen and the paper knew more about how to solve some problems than I did intellectually. It would be I would get answers and I would look at them and say, is that right? That can't be right. And I would have to learn how to just like trust that like actually the program has trained me so well that through habit and memory, I know that I know how to reach the correct answer. And I think that that's really amazing because it feels like a piece of learning I can really hold on to and that's mine now. And also on test day, it makes a huge difference because, I never saw the exact problems that I encountered on TTP or in practice tests through the GMAT. There's always when you sit down to take the test, you're always synthesizing a couple different topics into some problems that look a little bit different, and you really have to be able to use those reasoning skills that you built up to get to the right answer. And I think that was the big shift that TTP helped me do. Was when I was first approaching the GMAT, I thought if I memorized enough information, I would do well. And that was a mistake, right? It was not about memorizing the information. It was about building the skills layer by layer. And for instance, on the test day on my last test day where I got a 730, I took the quant section and I didn't have great time management. I felt like I rushed, towards the end. I did more guessing than I would have liked. I ditched more problems than I would have liked. And after the section, I felt terrible about how it had gone and really let my feelings kind of interfere. And then I was really shocked when the score came up at the end to see that I had scored a 50 in quant, and it was the best quant score I had ever gotten. And I think that really shows like the preparation and the target test prep course knows so much more about how to approach the GMAT and succeed on the GMAT than I do intellectually. And it kind of takes that sort of individual component out of the equation. TTP also really helped me on the verbal section with the GMAT, which for somebody who double majored in literature and loves to read and has a strong linguistic faculty, I was completely perplexed by. I didn't understand that it is not a knowledge test. It's a reasoning test. And I especially did not understand that when it came to sentence correction questions or critical reasoning questions. And I will say, while there's always a lot of emphasis because of the curve on the GMAT in terms of quant and just how competitive it is to get a good quant score, and that's where a lot of the emphasis goes on coursework. You can pick up a ton of points in verbal, and it feels like it's kind of de-emphasized in a lot of sort of the discourse that you see online or whatever about the test. And TTP's verbal content is excellent. The way that it breaks down all of the grammar pieces, but also just really driving home that fundamental piece of like, sentence correction isn't about memorizing rules, isn't about memorizing grammar rules. It's about understanding rhetorical constructions and their logic. With the same way that critical reasoning questions are, a little bit more clearly just logic tests. But I was amazed how, when you go through like the official guide and it's like, here's the section on critical reasoning, it gives you like a bunch of kind of inscrutable like logic proofs or whatever. It's like, if A, then B, then C, and like what, and it just was totally opaque to me. And I didn't improve my critical reasoning at all from going through that. Whereas here in the TTP course, walking through all the different types of questions and all of the different ways to answer the different propositions that are being given, where like, if I know it's this question type, then I know that the answer is going to perform A, B, or C work on the argument. That was extremely helpful in not only speeding up like how fast I was able to do critical reasoning questions, but also just how many questions I was able to get right. And really just created a system around something that seemed really nebulous to me. And also was a source of frustration because I thought, oh, well, the verbal is a place that I'm going to excel. And when that wasn't true, that was definitely a hard adjustment for me to make as a student. I will also say, when I started the course, I thought, and I took a look at like the amount of practice there is, especially in the quant section. I thought, wow, this can't be the right amount. This has to be way more than what's required. And actually, especially for somebody, again, not coming from a quant background, I had to build those skills day in and day out by moving through all of those practice sets. I think also something that TTP excels at that I was really looking for and needed was strategy on the test itself. It's really smart about presenting information about, hey, this is a practical game and we're here to succeed. Like we can sit around and calculate the area of a polygon as much as we want, but at the end of the day, like we're trying to get a good outcome. And I think that pragmatism coupled with the really excellent coursework helped me get to the score that I needed, because a lot of what I ignored in my preparation was test management, and especially like test anxiety. And I think TTP is full of really great resources and suggestions for how to handle that. In my preparation, I took the test 6 times, and I was practice testing at 750, 760, and registering official scores at 690. And 680. And I think my score didn't really start to improve. Like at a certain point, it wasn't about like lacking the knowledge or, not having the knowledge or not having done the practice, but was entirely about test preparation. And I think a lot of those suggestions that are in TTP around like having a good diet and like meditating, and, creating schedules around, training your brain and your body to be ready for the time that you take the test on your test day, paying attention to, what your emotional state is, and how you can regulate that, from question to question, is extremely helpful. And I think it was listening to those pieces in the end when I realized like, hey, I don't have a knowledge problem, I've got a test management problem, that I really started to see my score move up. I will also say that I was ready to give up. I think one of the soft, kind of the unspoken things that's really important for me to mention about Target Test Prep is that the company cares and showed me a lot of care personally. And I would not have achieved my score without them. I was, after my 4th test attempt, and my 4th 690, I was ready to give up. And I got the customary, how did it go after your test date? Email from Scott, and I responded, hey, I got a 690 and I'm just done. I'm done with this process. I'm sick of sinking time into this. I'm overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I don't understand, why I've hit the score ceiling. And Scott was really straightforward with me. He's like, well, you have X, Y, and Z items still to complete in your program of study. So why don't you do those? That you're capable of achieving the score. So focus in on completing the course, and then we'll talk about what other kind of support you might need to get there. And I did not expect that kind of a response especially from a self-study platform where, I wasn't doing personalized tutoring. I had never met anybody at the company. I had never really interacted with them. And that level of care really stood out to me. And I really want to drive home that, TTP was there to support me and help me keep going when I was, working on this stuff in isolation and completely ready to give up. And, it took me 2 more test attempts, but Scott was right. Like I was able to finish the coursework and then get the score that I needed. And that to me is, the most important piece is like, there are real humans on the other side of this thing who really want to see you succeed. And that feels like a rare thing to say today, especially about companies, in the MBA application space. Yeah, personal advice I would give to people who are preparing for the GMAT or looking into taking TTP, pace yourself. I think TTP has a great attitude when it comes to like this question of like, what's my score ceiling? There is no score ceiling. There is basically your discipline and effort over time. And I feel like my journey has really been a testament to that. I did not believe that I could get a score that would, that would put me, at least in terms of the GMAT, on par with other candidates at top 10 business schools. I just didn't think that that was possible. And TTP is really, again, really practical about, the only thing standing between getting that and you is really you. And we're going to be here to support you along that journey. The other thing I would say is pace yourself and be realistic about how much time it's going to take. I wasted a lot of money. I gave GMAT a lot of money that I did not need to give them, because I wanted to be done way before I was ready to be done. It's a long process. It took me hundreds of hours to complete. It is definitely a commitment. And once you're over that line, it feels great. It's wonderful. Again, like, I can't believe that I, got the quant score that I got. But I didn't think it was going to take me a year to do it while working full time. And I guess my advice is know yourself and budget for the marathon, because it is a lot of studying and a lot of practice. I feel like I when I was researching the GMAT online, I saw a lot of information out there of like, oh, it's like 120 hours of study, to get like a really good score and whatever. And so I was kind of operating under this assumption of like, yeah, that will be true for me. And I'm sure that that is true for lots of people. I think that, like looking at the TTP, self-study program, there's no way you could do that program in 120 hours unless it was like the accelerated version. So I was kind of operating under this false assumption of like, yeah, that'll be me, 120 hours. But like, I didn't really understand how much work I needed to put in to get to a place where I could get a competitive score. And so I would say just be realistic about where you're at. Like, it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It was a really wonderful experience working with TTP. I'm so thrilled that I got the score that I did. And I really believe that I wouldn't have been able to do it with any other platform, particularly because of that human element that TTP brought to my experience, and the way that I received the encouragement and the support that I needed to keep going and get to my target score. And I just don't think that would have happened with any other study platform. So good luck. You really will not regret signing up for TTP. It's going to take you through everything that you need to know and give you every tool that you need to have to really smash the GMAT and move on to the next part of your application process. It's a wonderful program with, best-in-class content, best-in-class presentation, and an analytics module that helps target exactly where you're still having trouble or where your weak points are at, which becomes really important when you're trying to get that last 10 points or that last 20 points improvement. So it has those three facets of like content, analytics, and people that are going to make you successful. It's a great decision, and I am so thrilled that I had the opportunity to learn from TTP. Thanks.